For today, our program, it's going to be based on an overview, a general idea of the exam, and then we're going to be talking about the different parts of the exam, and I will share with you some strategies and tips that have worked for myself and for my students in order for them to score good grades, okay? So first of all, okay, here we have, let's try to remember. So some of you might be familiar with the A2 key. I'm pretty sure that you are working with candidates at this level. So the A2 key, formerly known as CAT, is designed to assess basic language skills. So at A2 key, a candidate should score between 120 and 140 according to the Cambridge English scale, okay? So you guys should remember that as well when you are introducing your students to the exam. Candidate for CAT should be ideally a teen or an adult, but anybody could take the test, right? And this test is ideal, as I mentioned before, for showing basic language skills, but also for preparing students to higher qualifications such as B1 preliminary and B2 first. So the first part of the test, reading and writing, both components belong to the same paper. For this part, there's going to be a duration of 1 hour, and the test is going to be divided in 7 parts. The 2 last parts will be the writing part, right? Here I have written some tips for you. Just let me delete this, okay? So here you can see. So the first thing that you should tell your students, and first yourselves as teachers, is that you have to familiarize with the type of activities, with the type of tasks that you are going to find, okay? So you know, okay, in this part, we're going to be looking probably at some pictures, or maybe we are going to be looking at notices. For this other part, we're going to have longer tests. So these are the strategies that we are going to use. And also the time your students. Why? Because you will have 60 minutes. You need to see what is the best for your students to do. Generally, Cambridge suggests that you use 40 minutes, that you dedicate 40 minutes to the reading part of the exam and 20 minutes to the writing part, okay? However, you have to see, you know, I normally tell my students to leave more time for that activity that they find more challenging. Practice with your students a variety of materials, you know, expose them to poster notices. I'm pretty sure that you use some kind of books or written material, you know, for your classes, maybe the graded reader. So introduce them to that and teach them at the moment that they are reading, they should underline keywords, highlight keywords, because that will help them also for this kind of component, okay? So now let's take a look to the first part. Sorry. So in a different training that I had, somebody asked me, but teacher, how is someone going to highlight on a computer-based exam? Well, there is the opportunity to do that. You guys have the chance to do that. So tell your students that the only thing they have to do is to right-click on their mouse exactly on the word that they would like to highlight or on the sentence, and they will have that highlighted part as long as they are on that exactly part, right? So maybe if it's part 3, then they can highlight maybe some content words, and that will help them later. Now, so let's go with this topic, okay? The first topic is multiple choice. So what do we see here? Please, I know if you don't want to maybe participate speaking, maybe you can help me writing in the chat some of the answers. I think that it's important when you help me eliciting answers, so then you can remember better these strategies. So, okay, thank you very much. Here in the chat, okay, thank you very much, Paola. So please, just as Paola did, please help me, you know, bombard me with answers in the chat, because that's something that will help all of us, okay? Well, what you can see here, these are notices, okay? I'm writing in the chat, notices, and these are short kind of text, right? Now, when you introduce this activity to your student, the first thing that you should let them know is short information. Thank you, Alejandra. I really appreciate your answer. So we have short information, as you mentioned, and the first thing that you should tell them, don't look at the options. Why? because it could be a little bit confusing. Actually, if you want to start with this activity in class, maybe it would be ideal if you use a projector that you display just a bunch of these notices without any options for them to become familiar with these notices, okay? And then the first thing that they should do is ask the following question. Where would you see these notices? Where would you see these notices? Okay, so that would be number one. Where would you see them? So why is this important? Because the students then can start thinking and anticipating some answers. Does anybody know what is the name of the technique used in reading when we start anticipating answers? We start predicting, okay? That is called predicting. Maybe if you want to take notes, because you can use the same strategies for your classes, okay? So you're going to expose the students to this strategy, the strategy of predicting, anticipating the kind of information probably that they might find, where they will see this. And then second, it's about the purpose, okay? So I take a look at number one. Please know this afternoon's football class will be tomorrow instead, as Mr. Hall is away today. So I'm pretty sure that I will see this at some place where they teach football. And what is the purpose? So you start eliciting answers from the students in your classrooms, okay? So what is the purpose of this? Are we going to have classes today? Are we going to have classes tomorrow? And then they will find the answer probably before they start reading the options. This is the reason why it's important that they look at the text first and then the options. So when we are finding the purpose of the text, right? What is the strategy for this? Maybe in the chat, anybody? Reading a strategy or reading technique to find the purpose or the main idea of a text. Reading for gist, okay? So the students already have an idea of the main purpose of this text. And then what happens? Well, after that, they should already have an answer. They should go directly to the options. But the problem is that we have different kind of students, right? There are students who actually do not enjoy reading. There are students that can be a little bit weaker than others, that maybe for them this kind of activity is more demanding. So ask them to identify keywords, all right? So all texts have different keywords. If you take a look at this second notice here I have the word snack, right? So that is an important word because probably in my options, I might have to look for something similar. This is a keyword. And then when I take a look at my option, I already know that it's not that she has already eaten because she will make something later. So it means that she hasn't, my mom hasn't eaten yet. So what I do is, okay, with this keyword, I start identifying and I see here, even though I don't have the same word because I have light meal, I can already say, okay, maybe it's this one because I start relating them, right? Well, light meal, probably this corresponds to a snack. And then finally, be careful of distractors, okay? So distractors are, for example, in the third notice. I can show you here, just let me put this one here. All right, what happens in this part? 12. Well, I look at my option and I see that in my notice and in my option, I have 12. Oh, and some students might feel like, oh, probably that is the answer because they have some kind of similar information. This technique, it's called word spotting. Tell your students that they have to be careful with this information because it's tricky. It's normally there for the students to think that that might be the answer, but that's actually not the answer. Can anybody tell me in the chat what would be the correct answer for this notice? Museum open from 12. Children must be with an adult. The answer might be A, B, or C. Write in the chat, please. Okay, very good. I think Eduardo already got it. Eduardo and Valentina as well. Thank you very much. The correct answer was letter C, right? It says children must be with an adult. Children can visit the museum if they are with an adult. Remember that we eliminated letter B because that was actually an example of word spotting, right? It was difficult. Sometimes because it gets difficult sometimes, sorry, because you see like, oh, they have exactly the same kind of information. So remind your students that they have to be careful with these distractors. And even though somebody said that the answer was A, here it says adult can take children to the museum in the morning. However, the museum opens from 12. So the museum is not open in the morning, okay? Remember, if you are not sure, if your students are not sure, tell them to eliminate. Eliminating answers is always a good technique, okay? So remember, you're going to have 6 notices in this part of the test. And the most important is that you get your students familiar with all the variety of notices that they can find. They can find posters, they can find signs that are normally seen on the street, they can even find some screenshots from WhatsApp messages, etc. So thank you to the people that wrote the answers in the chat. Now we're going to take a look at part B. Sorry, part 2. Okay, oh, what spotting do we have? Okay, now look at this. In this part of the exam, we are having 3 longer texts, okay? Always 3 longer texts and 7 different statements. What do you have to do? You have to match each of these statements with one of these texts. Now, what do you think is the best strategy? Some people say that the first thing you need to do is to go through the text, skim it completely, and then go to the questions. However, you know, I have done these exercises before, and I can tell you that it's so much better when you first take a look at the questions. Why? Because when you take a look at the questions, you are also going to highlight or underline the most important words. That way, when you're going to skim your article, you will see, okay, I need to look, for example, in number 7, here we have an exhibition of clothes. So this is my important word. This is what I'm going to try to find very quickly in any of these texts. Does anybody remember what is the name of the strategy in which we read a text very quickly, trying to find specific information? Thank you. Scanning. Thank you very much. That's exactly the one. Remember, we're going to take a look at the text very quickly. You know, like it's like your eyes are just looking for that word. What word am I looking for? I'm looking for clothes. So first, I take a look at my statements one more time, and then I underline the important words. Here, for example, what people can touch, place to learn how people travel in the past. If we talk about how did you travel? Immediately, what comes to our mind? Different means of transportation. Also, probably in here, I'm going to look at different means of transportation. Here, it's free. This is an important word. And I'm just going to look for those words in my text. If you scan, remember, in scanning, you don't have to read every single detail. You have to go very quickly and try to find the words. If you take a look at the 3 different texts that you have on the left side, can anybody tell me which of these ones show either an example of clothes or something related to clothes? So if you take a look, okay, to this part, what do we have in there? Uniforms. I already take a look at Eureka, Museum of Museums. I didn't see anything related to clothes. And as I told you, do not expect to find the same word. You are always going to find any kind of word relationships, whether it is a synonym, whether it is an example of that word. In this case, we found uniforms that relate to clothes. And to be honest, you don't need to reread again in order to confirm your answer. You already know, like, okay, this is what I need to find, clothes, uniform. So I already know that the answer for number 7 is letter C. Okay, so remember, do not waste time reading all the 3 articles, like word by word. Remind your students, because some students have this tendency to translate every single word in order to understand the text. This is not necessary. Remember that at this point, what you want is that they get their answers correctly. And also, they just have 1 hour to finish 7 different activities. So it is necessary that they use these strategies. So in that way, they can be precise, and at the same time, they are making use of their time in the best way. Okay. So as I told you before, do not expect to find the same answers. Try to look for word relationships, but also if it's difficult, because maybe for some students certain parts might be difficult, try to infer meaning from the surrounding context. So as I said before, we highlight the most important words. These most important words are going to be our clues to find different answers. Does anybody know how do we call these clues that I try to find in a text and that they will help me eventually to find my answer?
Keywords.
Could be keywords. Thank you, Valentina. Thank you. Keywords. Anybody else? Maybe another way to call them? We find them in the context. You need to teach every single vocabulary word. Well, ideally, your students might need to have a bunch of vocabulary knowledge, but it's going to be difficult for them to know every single word. But you can always tell them, and this strategy is not just valuable for A2K, but for all the other exams. It's identify the meaning of the word just by looking at the sentence. It means you get the meaning through context, and that is called context clues. Okay, use context clues. Thank you, Valentina, for helping me with the answer. Now we're going to move to part number 3. Now, this text in here, okay, it's actually the longest one. Even though the other was divided in 3 parts, this is the longest one. And for some students, this is the most difficult part of the reading and writing text. Now, why is this? Because at this point, students might need to infer meaning, take a look at the attitude of the writer, make questions about why is this person writing this? What is the emotion of this person, right? Was the person sad? Was the person happy? Is the person trying maybe to advertise something? All of this. So this requires kind of a more in-depth reading exercises with your students in class. So now, for this one, remember that this is part number 3. What would be the strategy for this one? Should I look at the questions first, or should I look at the text? In the previous one, we first looked at the question and we started underlining keywords. Can I use the same strategy here? Well, just if I take a look at the question, but not at the options, okay? However, the best strategy for this kind of exercise is to start with the text. You're going to start skimming the text, right? Well, actually, you read very fast. So I already told you the name of the strategy. When you read the whole text very quickly, in order to find the main purpose, that it's called skimming. So before we check reading for G's, that is actually paying more attention, right? It's similar to skimming, but you have to pay more attention to that. But now I skim the text here. I have an idea, the text first, sorry. I have an idea. And then I go to my first question. And then I see, why was Will surprised? Okay, this is important for me. And then I'm going to start identifying where I can find the answer. Now, generally, or most of the time, all of these answers are structured in the same way as the text. It means that the first question will correspond to the first paragraph, okay? They are divided generally by paragraphs. So what I have to do right now is to scan that first paragraph in order to see if option A, B, or C is the correct one. So in here, I'm mixing 2 techniques, skimming and scanning. Does anybody know what is the name of this strategy when we mix these 2 techniques? I skim first, so I try to find the main idea first, and then I go paragraph by paragraph looking for this detail. I'm trying to look for surprise. Ideas of the name of that strategy? Well, that is called rapid reading or speed reading. Remember, when we mix skimming and scanning techniques together, that we call that strategy speed reading, okay? So maybe somebody can tell me in the first paragraph, what would be the context clue for surprise? Because I'm not finding anything that says surprise in there, which means that, oh my gosh, so then they are using a synonym or they are using an expression that means the same. Does anybody know? Can you identify what is the word that means surprised? So that is something that you have to do. Everyone loved it. And then after that one, I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe that. So thank you to the person that highlighted this part or underlined this part. So all of that, right? Everyone loved it. And what is that it? So another interesting exercise that you can use with your students, even though at this point, remember that it's just A2 key, probably they will still have problems recognizing different pronouns. What you can do is to create activities in which you practice referencing. It means that you eliminate pronouns, so then the students can write the correct pronouns according to the different nouns in the statement. Because look at this, everyone loved it. It refers to what? Well, at the moment that I start reading, I see that it refers to the street party. But this would be ideal for you to start making or making your students like familiar with this kind of activity. Because remember, if you're trying to get the students, okay, we're going to read the text, and then we're going to try to find answers, it's going to be more difficult. However, if you divide, okay, today we're going to practice referencing. You guys need to complete with the right pronoun. Then you are preparing them for this kind of exercise, right? They can recognize, oh, I know it refers to this because my teacher taught me that I have to go backwards and see, okay, exactly what part of the text, what noun it refers to, okay? And then I already found this one, right? Everyone loved it. I couldn't believe that since 1977, they never had another one. Again, referencing. One refers to the street party. Okay, so if you look at options A, B, or C, you can write your answers in the chat. What is the correct answer? You already recognize where I found my answer. Now, which of the three options, A, B, or C, actually means the same as what I had underlined? Remember, it says, I couldn't believe that since 1977, that's what made that person surprised, right? Since 1977, they haven't had another party. So for the person that said that B was the correct one, thank you very much. That is the correct one, okay? So you can see that even sometimes for us teachers, this can become a little bit challenging, right? This is the reason why. Try to introduce your students to a different kind of activities before you expose them to the real activity. Referencing exercises are a great practice for them, okay? So remember, this was the part that surprised him. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time without a party. Now, in this part of the text, you're going to have 5 questions, of multiple choice questions, A, B, or C. But the last part, the last question, it's going to be generally about the best title of the text, about the main idea or the main purpose of the text. Now, students at this point, can feel a little bit overwhelmed because if they don't have good reading techniques or abilities, it's going to be difficult for them to recognize the main idea. So something that I do with my students is that I tell them, okay, when you get to this part, because you already know, oh, the last exercise in this task, the last one, generally number 18, it's about finding the best title or the main idea or the main purpose. Look at your options first. Remember that they already skimmed the article first, right? They will look at the options and they will say, okay, why I love street parties, the street party we had, or how to have a street party. It is ideal if you tell them, just let me please delete this here. If they are not sure, because generally they might have the idea at the moment that they skim the text, tell them to go with each of the options to each paragraph and see if the paragraph either answers or relates to that specific statement. For example, A says, why I love street parties. So if I read all of this, okay, am I talking about the reason why I love the street parties? Not really. My father told me about this street party that he had in 1977. He told me about that, right? And then he mentioned, a little bit of what happened in there. So I already eliminated this answer. Why? Because the main idea should be in every single part of the text. And I already found that why I love the street party is not correct. Also remember that generally you identify the main idea of a text in which part? In the introduction, in the body, or in the conclusion? In which part of a text do you identify the main idea most of the time? Write your answers in the chat, please. Well, it's valid, your answer, Valentina. Thank you very much. Generally, we find that in the introduction, right? However, the conclusion sometimes paraphrases or generally paraphrases the introduction. So we can say that, yeah, your answer was correct, okay? But most of the time, we find the main idea of a text in the introduction. That gives us an idea of what we're going to be reading about, right? So now I can identify, okay, why I love street parties. That was not. How to have a street party? How? Well, in here it says that maybe we have to close the streets, no cars are allowed. But is it exactly how to have it? Like, are there all the steps on how to have a street party? I don't think that really means that, okay? If I go to the second one, then I talk about a party that we decided to organize, he says, inspired by the party of the father, right? So the father had one party, and here he had another party. The father had one party, he had another party. The father and he's the one talking, right? We, the street party that we had. First one, the one from the father, and then the one that they organized. So if you apply these strategies, and look, you see, I eliminate immediately, then it's going to be easier. Remember that this technique of identifying using the option is especially for students that didn't get the main idea at the moment that they were skimming this activity first, okay? So this is part number 3, and these are the 3 parts of the A2 key that are actually related to reading skills, okay? So one more time, remember, you start skimming the article, then scanning once that you identify the most important words in each part. Okay, let me delete this one here. Okay. And then you look at the options, right? And you can start. Okay. Eliminating options, right? Which ones do not correspond? Use context clues, right? Remember, when did we use a context clue? In the first part, right? In 14, we never found surprise, but we identify, oh, everyone loved it. I couldn't believe that. What is that? That since 1977, they never had another party, right? And remember, eliminate the options, be cautious with distractors. And now we are moving on with the grammatical and lexical part of the text, okay? There are 2 parts of the A2 key. There are part 4 and 5, in which the students have to do a similar kind of activity. They have to fill in the gaps. Can anybody tell me what is the name of the activity in which we have to fill in gaps? How do we call that activity? They are called close. This is the reason why you can see part 4, multiple choice close, and part 5, open close. Now, remember, the strategies for these ones are similar, but there is one difference between part 4 and part 5. In part 4, you're going to have alternatives. You're going to see the options, which somehow makes it easier for the students, to know, okay, it's either of these 3, it's one of these, so that's probably giving them the chance for better answers. Whereas in part 5, they don't have anything. They need to think what is the kind of word that they can use in here. So for this one, I would like to share, okay, this is an activity. I am the kind of person that likes to use devices in class, if I'm teaching face-to-face, but if I'm teaching online, of course, I have to use different kind of websites, to create activities for the students. And I'm pretty sure that all of you are familiar with live worksheets. Can you see my screen of live worksheets? So in here, you can create your own exercises, or you can already have a look at the different tasks that have been previously created. So for this kind of part of the test, right, for task 4 and 5, part 4 and 5 of the reading and writing, it would be ideal if you start teaching your students collocations. And when we talk about collocations, we talk about what? Words that usually go together. So this is a typical exercise for A2. Why? Because these are verbs that they will have in this exercise. What is the difference with do, play, and go? When you are teaching a class of sports or of hobbies, you can use this kind of worksheet. I have included it in my presentation. You can take a picture and use that activity. And then you have to tell your students, right, whether it is that you display this in a projector or if you give them a handout. The idea is that they use any of these 3 verbs, right? Do, play, or go to complete the sentences. And in that way, they can start practicing collocations because that's what they are going to see in part 4 and part 5 of the text, okay? So I go back to my presentation. I already showed you an activity that you can use with your classes. And I also recommend using live worksheets. You have a bunch of material there. So let's start with part 4, okay? Another strategy for this kind of activities that you can use in class is make them read the text aloud. First, you can correct pronunciation. Second, you can teach them intonation. Why? Because especially for part 5, where they don't have any options, if they start reading with intonation, it's going to be easier for them to recognize the kind of words that they have to use to complete the gaps, okay? So what I do is, for example, I tell them, okay, start reading. When I see that the students are telling me like red pandas leaf, I start correcting them, right? I guide them during the whole process. And I said, okay, read with more intonation. Red pandas live in Nepal, northern Myanmar, India, and Bhutan. As China. And did you see what I did? As China. I do that sound, and I made them do that sound, even though some students might be reluctant to do that. Why? Because it's easier for them. As in China. And then what is the relationship? I tell them China with China and these other names. Well, they are countries, so there's some similarity in them, okay? If you want at that point, you can already go to the options, move to the options, or you continue with all the text. That is up to you. You have to see how or what strategy you feel more comfortable with. For me, it's all about reading. Generally, I read everything, and then I go again to each part, to each option. So, and here we're using a little bit of prediction because somehow we are kind of anticipating the answers. But also, as I told you, introduce your students to topics of collocations. For part 4, it's more vocabulary, but for part 5, more grammatical features, right? Subject and verb agreement, determiners, prepositions. They should know some dependent prepositions at this point, and always they should look before and after the gap, especially when they find some kind of difficult statement. Maybe if they look at the part before, they can have an idea of what exactly they need to do. So, as I was telling you, number 19, right? China and these other places, right? What do they have in common? They are all countries. So I look at my options and I see as soon as much as, and as well as. So if still the student doesn't have the answer, because at this point they should know, okay, if we are talking about similar things, similar places, I need to look for a synonym of that, of similar, a synonym of also, right? If they don't find it at that point, maybe you can tell them, okay, let's look at every single option, okay? What is the problem with as soon as? When do you use it? As soon as is used for time. As much as is used for quantity. Is this about time? Is this about quantity? No. You see? And at the same time, you're teaching grammar while explaining this. You don't really need to explain every single word, but at the moment that you are going through the different options, you can use that chance, that opportunity to teach them different grammatical features. So I already know that it's not time because they don't talk about time. It's not quantity because this is not about quantity. So my only option is as well as. They a lot of their time in trees. Can anybody tell me what is the collocation for time? This is my clue, my context clue, time. Spend, live, or take. Hey, thank you. They spend time. Now, somebody can tell me, but teacher, I can sometimes use take and time. Yes, that's true. When I talk about duration, right? It takes me 3 hours to do this. It takes me 10 minutes to do this, but this is not about duration. It's about doing something, spending time. Thank you to the person that gave me the answer. And then what about number 22? They are more active during the night than the day, and they usually for food. Okay. 22, look, I didn't go to 21. Well, if you want to do 21, this is a clue, right? I need to find a word that collocates with this preposition. What would be the word there? Nice at, great at, good at. What is the correct one? They are very nice at, very great at, or very good at. Letter C. Thank you so much, Alejandra. And for 22, they usually, oh, I have 4. And I have verbs. Look, see, and find. Kind of similar, right? But I guess that just one of them collocates with 4 and actually creates a phrasal verb that is synonym of search. Look for. Very good. So this is how you can expose your students to this kind of exercises. As I told you, you saw the exercise in live worksheet. You can use it with different kind of topics, collocations that we use for sports, that we use, for our daily routines, prepositions, dependent prepositions. At this level, students have to be familiar with examples of dependent prepositions such as good at, bad at, famous for, interested in. All of these they already need to know, so you can prepare in your classes. You can include this kind of material. And in part 5, you do exactly the same, with the difference that here you won't have any kind of choices. So again, find some students who would like to participate, who like to read, who have like really good pronunciation, and make them read. So then the others, can learn from them as well. Okay, so you start with this and you say, okay, read aloud and focus on intonation, okay? Intonation, word stress, stress the most important words, and do the sound. Remember that I do a sound when I have each gap, so that can help you have an idea. You can start anticipating answers. Hi, mom and dad. Look, we are right now in part 5 in this kind of email. Hi, mom and dad. I hope everything is okay home. Everything is okay home. Okay, I have a place and I need to join this with the place. I need to use a preposition to join that. Can you write in the chat the correct answer? Perfect. At. I arrived in New Zealand yesterday. On the plane, I sat next a really nice woman. Well, that one is very easy. What is the perfect? Next to a really nice woman who told me about of interesting places I could visit, that who told me about of interesting places. Now, careful, because this one it's more difficult. Here I see grammar, right? Of different places. Okay, so maybe one of my students say, oh, teacher, probably is some, or maybe is most. What is the problem there? Okay, at that moment, I can tell them, okay, what happens if you use some and of, and then after that, you put of. So I teach at that moment, I go to my whiteboard and I tell them, remember, you can use some of, most of, but if you use of, you obligatorily need to use a determiner. And what is a determiner? Oh, determiner, words like the, my, those. So these pronouns are called determiners. So I tell them that the only way that I could use some or most there is if I had a determiner. Do I have a determiner there? Some of interesting places, I don't have the determiner there or any other determiner. So I am already teaching them that that option needs to be discarded, okay? But I can use other. Does anybody have an idea of the word that I could use there? Something that collocates with of. I have in my mind something that collocates with of, that is a lot of. And with a lot of, I don't need to use a determiner. A lot of interesting places. But what is the problem with a lot of? That I have to use just one word. And a lot, it's two words, right? Okay, so that, okay, I already discard this one. What I can use is a synonym of a lot of, that it just has one word. And that one is perfect. Thank you, Carlos. Lots. You see how I identify and look. I do not prepare. Okay, so for this class, it is up to you, but I think that it is more interesting when before you prepare, okay, a grammar class for your students, you use the same exercise, okay, this is what they are going to have for the exam. They are going to have the exam, I don't know, in 3 months, 4 months at some point, but use the same material. And there you start teaching those grammatical points. It's easier because they are going to write down and they know, this is something that I sometimes see in this part. It's easier for them because believe me, they hate when you start with a grammar topic and by the time that you do this exercise, probably they have forgotten. So I already told them that if I use some and most and I have of, I need to use a determiner. Otherwise, I cannot use it. And I also taught my students a synonym of a lot of, that is lots of, you see? That's how you prepare these exercises in your class, okay? Any questions? Remember that you can always ask me anything, if you have any queries, if you have any doubts, I'm here to answer your questions, okay? Otherwise, we move on. Okay, so this is all the reading and let's call grammar and vocabulary part of the exam. Now we move to the writing part of the exam. As I told you, you have 60 minutes. You see, okay, is this difficult for them? Are they going to spend 40 minutes in all of these 5 activities? Maybe yes, maybe not. Maybe they just need 30 minutes and then they can have 10 minutes, to review or to dedicate to the writing activity. So now you can see here. Okay, so for the A2 exam and the A2 for schools exam, the topics, for the writing exam are exactly the same, right? You will have to make an email or reply to an email, and the other, you're going to have pictures and you have to create a story. So if you take a look at this exercise, this is part 1, it says guided writing. Guided writing. Remember that guided writing is a strategy that I'm pretty sure that you already used in your classes, in which you expose students to the kind of writing that they are supposed to make, and you give them like every single detail, okay? So you tell them, for example, here you have to create an email. You have to reply to an email, okay? So they already know that. Also, you have a minimum of 25 words, minimum of 25 words. Can you write more? Yes. Now, what is the problem? What is the problem when you write more words? Does anybody know what is the problem when students, for example, write 50 words? Are they going to be penalized? Because here it says minimum 25, but they are not giving me a maximum of words. Remember that they can write 30 words if they want, 35 words if they want, but the more words they write, the more mistakes they are likely to have. So 25, 27, 30 words, that's okay. So when you guide your students to these activities, first, okay, what you have to do, reply to an email, how many words were at least 25. Then these 3 questions are key. Ask them these questions. Who wrote this email? Look at the example. Who wrote the email? At this point, they need to recognize, right? Who wrote the email? How can I see that? I don't know. This person is the same person, right? Who wrote the email from? Francis, okay. What kind of relationship does Francis and the other person have? This is important. Why? Because according to that relationship, you can decide if your email is going to be formal or informal. I can see already hi. And hi, do we use for informal or formal emails? It's friendship. Very good. This is informal. Thank you. But maybe it's not Francis who writes the email. Maybe it's my teacher, my English teacher writing an email to me. So, okay, now the situation changes, right? Now it's, okay, it's not going to be hi, it's going to be dear student, probably. So it's a different kind of relationship. This is clue for you. Why? Because you have to choose between formal or informal writing. And when we talk about levels of formality, for maybe some of the teachers here that have done the TKT, how do we call that? Formal and informal writing, levels of formality, tone that corresponds to the area of register. So whenever you're preparing your classes, if you see register, what's register? It's about the levels of formality, okay? Don't include any irrelevant information. Remember, what do you have to do? Okay, after I have already recognized that I have to write an email to my friend Frances, I'm going to look at the questions. In this email, they are normally going to be 3 questions. Well, generally are 2 to 3 questions. Generally are 3 questions. And you take a look at those questions. The first question here is, where is the best place in your town to meet? Second, what would you like to do? And shall I bring anything? Those 3 questions need to be answered in your reply. So how can you practice this in class? Well, first, to introduce them, okay? You can copy the same format. Hi, Francis. And then give them examples of introductions. Hi, Francis. Francis started with, it's great that you're free to meet me this weekend. You can reply to them with, oh, I'm so happy to hear from you. Thank you for your email. And then you start answering your questions, okay? Where? The place. What would you like to do? Think about a variety of activities. You would like to visit touristic places, you would like to go to the park, etc. And what shall I bring? Well, maybe because of the weather in Quito right now, it's raining. You should bring an umbrella, or you should bring, your raining boots. And then you can even copy the same farewell expression, write soon, and then your name. And that's everything that you need to do. That's how you expose your students to this kind of activities. But these 3 questions are clue before you start with this exercise. Now, I have put in here, if you guys want, you can take a picture of this. Here we have, okay, this is an example. Okay, think everybody can see it. Hi, Francis. I think we can meet up outside Central Station. So do we have an introduction? Well, I have hi, Francis. And then I go directly with, I think we can do this, okay? And am I answering the first question? Yes, outside Central Station at a cafe called Victoria. Okay, I have already answered my first question. We can visit the main touristic places and take some pictures. Okay, I have already answered my second question. Bring a sweater and an umbrella because it gets cold in the afternoon. I answer my third question, and then see you soon, Harry. That's all, right? Do your students have to count the words? Well, if they are doing computer-based exams, they are going to have a timer there. Sorry, not just a timer, but also they will see, they have like a word count kind of button there where they can see the number of words that they have written, but they can have an idea, right? You know, if you practice in class, well, I think that if I write around, I don't know, seven lines, you know, that might complete 25 words, okay? So remember to practice writing to friends, writing to equals, writing to teachers regularly, because the more practice your students have, the more confident they might feel, or they will feel for sure doing this kind of activity. So this was the first reading. Remember, it's an email. And then the first writing activity. So somebody is connecting. These people connect at 5 o'clock. Okay, I imagine that you were teaching also. So this is an example of the second writing activity, okay? Now, something that I do, and I would like to share with you when I am teaching, you know, a face-to-face class, and I'm pretty sure that you work in schools in which you have probably 15, 20, 25 students, and everybody is sitting in the classroom and you have columns. A good idea is to prepare a handout in which you have the pictures there, okay? So if it's 5 different columns, I'm gonna need 5 handouts, and I just put the picture. Okay, and then I said to the students, the idea is that somebody's connecting. Okay, the idea is that each student will write a sentence as a continuation of the previous one. The teacher can start with one sentence on the board, or you can already have it written on your handout. And then you say, okay, you have a timer. I always work, you know, with one of my timers. And then I said, each student will have 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 1 minute. It depends, okay, for writing one sentence. After the minute, I'm going to let you guys know that you have to pass the paper to the student behind. And then that is a great activity full of interaction, because that paper needs to get to the end. And then the first column that finishes will be the winner. Well, obviously, the one that gives you the best story, okay? And what can you do? You can reward them with 5 minutes extra of break time, or I don't know, whatever it is that you guys want to do. But the important is that you keep them engaged. Because remember, students don't like to write. Generally, they prefer right now, you know, in this world of technological devices, they just want to be with their cell phones all the time. And it's good if you include, you know, interactive activities using devices in class. I think that it's great for them. But these kind of activities, and they have to write, you know, using pictures and following the idea of the previous person, it's excellent. It works with their creativity. They will develop, you know, the use of cohesive devices that they should know at this point. Remember that at this level, they won't have enough knowledge of connectors, but they will definitely know first, second, then after that, later, finally, they can use these connectors when they look at the pictures. Now, how many pictures will you have? You're going to have 3 pictures. So the activity that I have just told you about is something that you can introduce in your classes, but let's suppose that you want to explain about this part of the test in your class and you're using a projector. So you can tell them that the first thing they need to recognize is, okay, what are the 3 main events in the story? So what is the question for recognizing the 3 main events? The question is, what are they doing? So, okay, picture number 1, what is he doing? Don't expect them to say, oh, he's yawning, because they won't know yawn, the verb yawn at this time. But they can say like, oh, he got up, or he is getting up, or he is getting out of bed. And then in picture number 2, what is he doing? Well, he is looking for food, I think. I think he's hungry, right? He's looking for food. He's opening the fridge. And in picture number 3, what is he doing? He's sitting at a cafe. It seems like he's eating something, okay? So I have already recognized my main ideas. At the same time, I am practicing the use of present continuous, right? Because I want to focus on the main idea at the moment. And then I can tell them, okay, at the moment that you start creating the story, who is this story about? Do we have a name here? No, I don't have a name. So, okay, use your creativity and invent a name. Make up a name of the guy here in the story. Say John, Peter, whatever it is that you want to say. Then where? Focus on the where. Or in the first picture, he's in his house. And where? In the bedroom. Okay. So in this lesson, I have bedroom, kitchen, cafe. It would be ideal that you have already introduced your students to this kind of vocabulary. You can start in that week, okay, on Friday, I'm going to be covering this part of the test, and the story picture that I'm going to be using is this one here. So then when you prepare your lesson plans for that week, focus on that, okay? The students in that week, they need to learn parts of the house. Maybe some furniture as well. Places in the city. Okay, that's going to be a week in which we will focus about parts of the house and places. And then on Friday, when you are introducing this activity to them, it's going to be easier for them because they already have a lot of vocabulary. It's easier when they already have that vocabulary, and then from that, they can start building up their story. So what is happening? I already answered that, when I said like the main ideas. Why? Well, here, I'm pretty sure that what is the reason that he went to the restaurant? Well, because there was no food in his house, probably. I can ask that, okay? Now, should you write this story in present or in past? Now, remember that at A2, students should already know the simple past. And also some past of irregular verbs, not just the past of regular verbs, not all of them, but some of them. They decide. It's not compulsory that they have to write the story in past. They can do it in present or they can do it in past. It's whatever they prefer, whatever they feel more comfortable with. Transition words. What were the words that I told you that they should use? Well, first, second, later, finally, because they know these ones. It's going to be more difficult for them to come up with maybe subordinate conjunctions, right? But at this point, they definitely need to know because, but, so, they definitely need to know and, so they should include these connectors in the stories. Also, another thing that you should teach before you go to this activity is the use of adjectives and maybe some adverbs as well. What kind of adjectives? Well, characteristics, right? Is he happy or sad? Is the place beautiful? Is it messy? Is it dirty? Descriptive adjective. Introduce your students to a variety of adjectives. Remember that you have a word list in the handbook for teachers, that are preparing students for A2. And at the end, I will share that link with you, right? Proofread. Very important. Why? Because there are spelling mistakes. So tell them to proofread to make sure that they have written everything correctly, that they have separated maybe with periods, that they have used commas. Like, probably do not expect that at this point they know all the rules of punctuation, but they need to use commas, especially if they are talking about, I don't know, look at picture number 2, when John opened the fridge, he saw that he just had milk, eggs, and lettuce. So you see milks, comma, eggs, and lettuce, okay? So teaching that they have to use their commas there. And here I have an example for you to see, right? So they just have to write like approximately 5 or 6 lines, no more than that. And remember, in here in the example, the person decided to write it in past. It's not obligatory. It can be in present as well. So now I'm pretty sure that everybody has different devices. I'm going to give you an activity just to see if you remember some of the points that we have discussed today. And also, because I would like you to see how you can use this activity with your students in class. This is from another website that I love using. The name is WordWall. And here it is. It's in the chat. So can you open it, please? And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to finish the activity. You can do the same with your students. You can time them as well. Okay. 2 minutes. And this kind of activity, well, for you, because you are teachers, will help you kind of remember some of the reading strategies and reading techniques that we talked about previously. Okay, you have 1 minute to finish. It doesn't matter if you don't get them all correct. Lorena, did you finish? I think I heard your voice. Did you finish, Lorena? Lorena Jimenez, no? Thirty seconds. 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. 15 seconds. All right. Did anybody finish the activity? Remember that you can also interact with emojis. Yes, thank you, Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos, do you have the possibility to share your screen? Do you think? Yes? Can you share your screen with us? So we can use just your screen, to see just the answers. I'm pretty sure you have the possibility, because always when I have my Zoom training or classes, I love for my students to start writing, annotating, sharing. Yes? Could you share your screen, please? Because I don't see it. We don't see it yet.
Give me a sec.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Juan Carlos. Okay, so can you click on what happened? Something happened. It's like we cannot see. Okay, thank you. Can you click on show answers? Okay, show answers, can you? Carlos Galarza, this is perfect time for teachers. Believe me, this is what I do with teams. You guys need to have it like, okay, immediately, ta, 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 ta. It's going to be excellent exercise for your brain as well. Okay, something happened, Juan Carlos. I don't know what happened with your sharing, but it's fine, okay? No worries. I'm going to share it myself. So remember, in this kind of activity, okay? First of all, can anybody tell me, now that you have done it, this activity is called what? Drag and drop, right? Remember, the students need to drag and drop. You can use it for a bunch of things, for vocabulary. You want to introduce them to vocabulary. You can use it for the cloze exercises for this test, for part 4 and 5. You can create this. Remember, this word wall activity is free. Can everybody, and you can even use my template and then just change the information. So combination of skimming and scanning, that was called speed reading. Right? Approach that aims to scaffold the students' writing skills by breaking down tasks into manageable steps, providing feedback. So I show them every step of what they have to do and I provide feedback. That's called guided writing. Language learning activity that involves filling in the blanks. Oh, filling in the blanks. I remember close. It could be multiple choice. It could be open close. A strategy that involves connecting existing knowledge to new information to anticipate what the text is about. That is prediction. Style, tone, and level of formality. Oh, level of formality, that is register. Words that provide specific characteristics about the noun they modify, descriptive adjectives. A strategy that uses rapid reading in order to find specific facts. Scanning. Process of reviewing a written document to identify and correct errors, especially spelling errors. That's proofreading. A strategy that uses rapid reading in order to find key points or main idea. Well, I'm confusing. Is it reading for a gist or skimming? Well, are kind of similar, right? But I know that in the last one I see a strategy similar to skimming. Okay, so definitely if it's similar to skimming, that is not going to be skimming. Okay, that's how I find. And finally, by default, I know that this one is context clues. Okay, these are excellent activities that you can include. I'm pretty sure that all your students have cell phones, smartphones right now. Use this, believe me, that really makes classes more interesting. What it says, you reminded us about the test. Yeah, you know what, guys? The reason why I gave you just 2 minutes for these activities, well, first is because unfortunately we don't have more time. We just have 40 minutes and we still have to go through listening and speaking. But we have covered the most important part of the test. Believe me, reading and writing are generally the most difficult ones. If you practice speaking on a regular basis with your students, that's not going to be an issue for them. And it just lasts what? 10 minutes? No more. Whereas the reading and writing will last 1 hour. And listening, well, I know that the problem with listening is generally the fact that students have problems with pronunciation. So practice that, okay? So now I have given you ideas about using word wall for different activities. Remember, you can use this template and change it to your convenience, okay? So now let's go with listening, okay? For the listening, the students are going to have approximately 30 minutes, 5 tasks, very easy. Now, what do you have to do? First thing, right? Expose them to listening activities. Something that I like to do, it's something called shadowing. I don't know if you have heard about the shadowing technique. That is when you listen to somebody speak and then you have to repeat exactly the same. In that way, you can work on intonation, you can work on word stress, you can work on connected speech. At this point, the students don't have any idea of these things, right? Probably in B1, they will recognize more. And in B2, they need to know some rules of connected speech by them, right? So use that shadowing technique. I will show you a link that I always use with my students in class. So types of recording, they are going to have monologues, they are going to have pictures here, they are going to have short dialogues, but also long dialogues. So they need to pay attention to main ideas, tone, etc. The types of activity, similar to reading, you're going to have fill in the gaps, multiple choice, and remind the students that they need to infer meaning by listening to what they say. So if somebody tells the other person, right, something like, Oh, what a pity. Oh, that's a shame. Maybe the students don't know what is the meaning of what a pity and that's a shame, but they can infer it by the tone of voice, right? If I say to them, listen to the tone. Oh, that's a shame. Oh, that's a shame. Was the person happy? Was the person excited? Was the person scared? Was the person sad? So you see, and then I asked to all the class in order to elicit answers. Oh, that's a shame. I think that the person was sad because they heard something and they don't know the meaning of that's a shame, but they can recognize it just by inferring that tone, okay? Also, prediction, try to predict the answers, especially in the first part of the exam that is with pictures. I will show you right now. So in the first part of the listening exam, the students will have 3 pictures. So ideally, when you show them this part, ask them questions. In the first picture, where is the post office? Oh, the post office is behind the bus station. In picture number 2, or in picture B, where is the post office? It is next to a cafe or a restaurant. And in picture 3, it's like on the corner and there is like a park across from the post office. So they already have an idea. They already know, oh, this is the clue, right? I need to find words like behind, words like next to, and words like across from. And what are these words? Next to, behind, across from. What are these? You can write your answers in the chat.
Preposition of place.
Excellent, thank you. Prepositions of place. So, before I start with this activity, as I told you, you prepare your lesson plans maybe for a week or maybe for a month. I don't know. It depends on the school. I don't know if you have the freedom to decide what to create for your classes. But that's what I do. That week I say, okay, my goal is Friday. On Friday, I'm going to introduce them to this topic of the exam, which is part 1. They're going to have pictures. So I'm going to introduce them this week to prepositions of place. Again, vocabulary about places in the city, vocabulary about sports, vocabulary about activities that they generally do. And then I'm ready for my activity on Friday. And believe me, when you introduce your students to vocabulary or to grammar, because they need to learn prepositions of place for this topic, it's going to be easier for them to find the answers. Because remember that it's like a scaffolding, right? They start with this vocabulary, then grammar, and then they have the real activity. So here, I'm going to play very quickly the first part, okay? So once the students have identified, okay, you already have identified, okay? Then they're going to listen for key information, right? Listening for gist, okay? The key information of this part, okay? Can you tell me if you can hear? Could you hear? Track 3? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Listening part 1, worksheet 1. For each question.
Okay, listen.
1. Where is the post office?
Excuse me, is there a post office near here?
Yes, there's a big post office on School Street. There's a fantastic little cafe next to it. You can take bus number 12 from outside the bank.
Can I walk to the post office?
Yes, you have to walk through the park and turn left after the museum.
Right, so where is the post office? A, B, or C? You can tell me or you can write your answers in the chat. Did anybody hear? Very good. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Letter B. Now, something that you can do, you see that I didn't stop, right? Why? Because in the exam, they never stop, right? They finish that whole monologue or dialogue, and then they repeat it again. Now, if you think that your students are struggling with listening activities, what I recommend is at the moment that you find the answer, for example, did she use next to? Did she use next to? I don't remember if she used next to.
Where is the post office?
Excuse me, is there a post office near here?
Yes, there's a big post office on School Street. There's a fantastic little cafe next to it.
Ah, yes, there is a fantastic little cafe next to it. All right, so I recognize next to, that was my keyword, right? You can stop there and then ask them, what was the clue? Next to. And then you can continue, right? So if you see that they are really struggling, stop. In your practice, stop, but remind them that during the test, they are just going to listen the whole dialogue twice, and there's never any stopping there. So they really need to figure it out. So when you expose your students to vocabulary and you practice with real pictures, remember that the more they practice, the better they will perform. Believe me, this topic, it's very easy for some students. On the other hand, the second topic of the listening exam, it's about filling in the gaps. Now, why is this topic challenging? Well, first of all, at this point, your students need to have practice spelling. I'm pretty sure that there are candidates for spelling bee at this point, right? Maybe students from 7th or 8th grade. And spelling is important because sometimes you will have to listen to names of streets or names of last names or names, right? And then we'll spell these words. And remember that when they spell, they don't say like M-A, no, they go fast, right? So they need to get it. It's always one word that they need to use. Expose them to topics such as dates, months of the year, days of the week, numbers. You will generally find numbers in here, whether it is to talking about prices or ordinal numbers, and then some kind of random vocabulary, maybe, things. In general, one thing, because it's always one word, all right? So for this one, maybe you can write. Remember that you can annotate on my screen. Feel free to write. Anybody, anybody who wants to help me, I would really appreciate if you also participate and write the answers here.
Track 6, Part 2. For each question, write one word or a number or a date.
You generally have like 15 seconds to read the activity.
Renting a boat for a holiday.
Thank you for calling Riverboat Holidays. This is the information line for booking our boat called Moonlight. This boat can be booked by groups of different sizes. The smallest group is 2 people, and the largest is 8 people. There are 3 bedrooms and a large sofa that 2 people can sleep on. The boat can be booked for holidays from the 1st of June to the 31st of August, but this summer it's only available in August. June and July are already booked. If you book a...
What is the problem with June and July?
Are totally full.
Yes, they are already booked. So excellent opportunity to to teach your students the meaning of the verb book, because they know book already. They use a book for their classes, but probably they don't know that book is also a verb. And what do you book? Well, you book different kind of appointments. You book tables, right? So teach them that, okay? That's an excellent opportunity. Can anybody tell me what was the answer for number 1?
8.
8, very good. Now, the student should write the answer in number or in letters?
Numbers or letters?
Perfect, very good. It could be numbers or letters. They are not going to be penalized if they change, because you see between 2 and 8. However, I always recommend that they maintain the same format. They are not going to be penalized. Like, this is excellent for weaker students that they don't know how to spell. So tell them, go for the number, no problem. But for other students, I always said, you know how to write the number, write it, okay? What was the month they mentioned? 1st to 31st? August, very good. Also, excellent opportunity to remind my students that every time that they are writing either months of the year or days of the week, they always have to use?
Capitalization.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Okay, so you see, that's how you organize your activities. Like when you as teachers really familiarize with the activities, you're going to have all the creativity in the world to I don't know, to set up a class that is awesome, that they will enjoy, but most importantly, that they will really learn from. Okay, you see, I already know, okay, I'm going to introduce numbers. I'm going to remind them of this. Maybe they can run to the whiteboard to write the answers. You know, the first person that listens to the answer can run to the whiteboard to write the answer, okay? Now, for part 3 and 4 of the test, you will have multiple choice exercises, okay? Now, what is the difference between them? Well, the difference is that in the first one, you're going to listen to an informal conversation, whereas in the other one are 5 different monologues or dialogues, which means that for the first part, the students will listen to everything completely and then try to find the answers. And in the other one, they have to remember that once they do number 1, number 2 has nothing to do with number 1. It's different kind of information. I would recommend that for this topic or for this part of the test, you skim through. Juan Carlos, you have a question. Yes, if they have a mistake with 8, that's a problem. Because remember that at this point, they should be really familiar with numbers, especially from 1 to 10, they should write them correctly. So practice numbers, right? And this is important. Why? This is why practices in class are important, because they will help you recognize, oh, you know, like Andrea has problems writing these numbers, so she can practice that. Look at your mistake, okay? So it's important. It's important that you practice this with them. This is the reason why I personally go for letters instead of numbers, because that gives them a good opportunity to practice as well. It's going to be wrong. Yes, it is going to be wrong. If they write it in that way that you have written it in the chat, yes, it's going to be wrong. In that case, as I said, it's better if they write the number. So practice numbers in class, okay? And thank you for your question. So for this kind of exercise, what do you have to do? Go to the question first. Check your question. Underline the part that you really need to focus on. Oh, in here, the name of the teacher. And here, you will hear 2 friends talking about the new apartment. What did he buy? Can anybody tell me, instead of buy, you know, I can instead listen to my sentence, right? Yesterday, I bought a new cell phone, a new smartphone. If I want to replace the verb buy, I bought, which other verb can I use?
Get.
Exactly. That's what you need to tell your students. Teach them synonyms. Tell them, probably you're not going to listen to buy, because remember that at this point you should know some synonyms, but probably you will listen to get in the past, right? Because what did he buy? So listen to that. He bought, he got, right? Careful with the options that are like, my mother gave me, I had this present. It's different, right? Remember, intonation was especially for this topic. What was the attitude, right? Was the person sad? What can we infer? Was the person happy, sad, elated? What can you infer for that context, right? Word spotting. And you remember word spotting? What was that? When we have words that are similar, but they have nothing to do with the answer, right? They are there for some reason, but they are not the answer of the question. They are tricky words. So in this topic, a lot of process of elimination. Sorry if I go kind of fast, but I want to go to this topic here, because here I have an exercise that I would also recommend using for your classes. The last topic of the listening is matching. You're going to hear a conversation generally between 2 people, and you're always going to have words that come from the same topic. And does anybody remember how do we call these kind of words when they come from the same topic or from the same group? These words are called lexical sets. So practice your lexical sets. Brainstorm ideas in class. Okay, so if today we are learning about food and drinks, okay, give me ideas. What is something that we generally eat for breakfast? And then you start, okay, so we're going to have bread, we're going to have a butter, we're going to have cheese, we're going to have yogurt, we're going to have cereal, You brainstorm ideas in the class. It's excellent for them to remember the vocabulary, because in this part of the test, students are working with this kind of lexical sets. And an activity that I recommend using, let me show you. Okay, my activity is this one here. I cannot click because I have annotating here. Okay, so here we go. Can you see the roulette? Like the wheel here?
Yes.
Yes. So this is an excellent link to practice different kinds of food. So you have to play it. You see, you play it here. You have to spin the roulette, and then you stop whatever you want. And then what the students have to do? In this case, they have to, well, this is a hamburger. So this one here, right? They will have to click on the correct one. They can do this on their phones. Now, something that you can do, you can also use this as a template, because this is a Padlet activity. I'm sure everyone is familiar with Padlet. Is that you can change, like you can change this activity and eliminate the options. So then instead of choosing, which is very easy, they can write it on the board. And in that way, you can also check their spelling mistakes. It's an excellent activity to practice lexical sets, okay? I have shared with you the link in the presentation. And then from that, you can match each person with the kind of food and drink that they are bringing to the picnic, okay? Does anybody have any questions about the listening part of the exam? No? Okay, I recommend using Padlet when you are introducing vocabulary. Now, tell me if you can hear.
Track 15, Listening Part 5, Worksheet 1.
Could you hear?
Yep, yes.
Perfect,
Each
thank you.
question, choose the correct answer. Look at question.
Okay, so we already know that Sarah is bringing sandwiches, okay? Now let's see what about Mike, because they go generally in order, right? However, it's not like, okay, you usually will find
You
it
will hear
like that,
Sarah
okay?
talking to Mike about a picnic. What will each person bring to the picnic?
Hi, Mike. It's Sarah. I'm phoning you about the food and drink for Samantha's birthday picnic on Saturday.
Hi, Sarah. That's good. What shall I bring?
Well, I'm going to make some sandwiches. Why don't you bring some crisps?
Maybe I could bring some ice cream instead? Everyone likes it, and I think it's going to be very hot this weekend.
Good idea. Can you bring chocolate? It's my favourite.
Sure.
All right, so very easy. What is Mike bringing to the party? To the picnic, sorry. Ice cream, very good. And you can tell the students, which other food did you already hear? Oh, we heard sandwiches, right? But that is what Sarah is making. And another important thing, remember when we talk about word relationships, synonyms. Phone, ring. Generally, ring is more used in B1 than in A2, because you will see a lot of like is ringing about something, right? Tell your students, because generally they just use calling. My mother is calling. Tell them to replace it by using phoning. I'm phoning for yada 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 yada. Use them, these synonyms. It's very important. At least introduce them to one or two synonyms. As I told you before, you have a word list that I will show you pretty soon. And here I have. Sorry, Talia, it was your answer. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we are moving, and we just have, I think, less than 20 minutes. The speaking part, okay? So remember, this activity of the roulette, my students love it, especially if you're working with children that are taking probably not the A2 key, but the flyers, and then they have to be introduced to vocabulary. But also for teenagers, they all love this kind of activity, okay? So see what kind of material you can prepare, all right? So very quickly, okay? Let's take a look at the different strategies, okay? Listening in a foreign language is an easy or complex process?
It's complex.
Complex, right? Whomever says it's easy, well, probably because that person is a native speaker, so they can understand every single word. But for our students, especially since they are just being introduced to Cambridge exams, is going to be complex, right? Students have to be able to understand the main idea of what is said, as well as details. What kind of details? Oh, clothes. I need to look for clothes. Are they general details or specific? Main idea is general, but details are specific, right? They may need to check any predictions they made. This is grammar. What is the word that is missing there? They may need to check any predictions they made. What word is that? This is an excellent practice for students at B1, B2 level of English, and understand the speaker's meaning, emotions, and opinions. Oh, what did he mean by that? What does she mean by this? They may have two relationships between speakers. I don't know the relationship, but he said, "Hey, honey." He said, "Hey, honey," to her, but they don't say anything about being father and daughter, brother and sister, husband and wife. How can I get the meaning? By what is that word that we use when we kind of interpret what they say? We infer. When you don't know, but you say, "Oh, hey, honey," then I start, it's also predicting, right? Like, okay, I am inferring that they are probably in a relationship because, "Hey, honey," or maybe because of the voice of the little girl, it's father and daughter, and they say, "Hey, honey," to his daughter, right? Infer relationships between speakers, identify context, right? Now, certain strategies are when students listen to identify overall ideas expressed in the whole recording. What are they listening for? Listen for the principal idea. Synonym of principal?
Main.
Main idea. Perfect. Listening for a specific, particular information. These are specific details. When students try to guess key information, they try to guess because they want to anticipate. What is the name of that technique?
Prediction.
Prediction. Very good. Students listen to identify the difference between what the speaker says and what they actually mean. Okay, so I need to interpret. They don't give me exactly that. It means that I have to infer meaning, right? Inferring meaning. Identifying is when students listen to the mood. If it's the mood, is that the opinion? Or emotion? If it's the mood. If it's the mood, is it opinion or emotion?
Emotion.
Emotion, very good. And on the other hand, if I have to listen to identify the attitude of certain speakers, right? According to what they say, is that opinion or emotion? I have to listen for their opinions. Do they like it? Don't they like it? What do they think about that? Recognizing, students listen to contextual clues. Contextual clues, or these words that help me recognize. They don't know that vocabulary word, but they can infer the meaning or get the meaning by looking at the context clues, okay? So these are the strategies that you generally use for listening. And even though I think we have just 15 minutes, let me introduce you to the speaking part of the test, right? So first of all, in class, make sure that your students are able to answer simple questions. Simple questions like, what's your name? Where do you live? Do you work or are you a student? Because those questions are going to be asked. Of course, you know, if they are teenagers, there is the A2 key for schools in which they don't have that kind of question, right? They just say like, what do you study? So when they ask, what do you study? It means that my students need to know subjects. Oh, I study math, English, literature, physics, chemistry, blah, blah, blah. Mock tests, not just for the speaking part, for all the other components, right? Watch videos in class, stop them and say, instead of that, what can we say? Look for alternatives. It's better when you use videos for all the class and you start working with everybody. Instead of this, what can we say? You know, prepare classroom activities based on expressing likes and dislikes. This is an important part of the test, okay? And I will explain to you why. And another important tip, encourage learners not to memorize set pieces. Typical things that happen in the speaking exam. I ask the students, where do you live? And at A2 level of English, they tell me, oh, I come from Quito, that is the capital of Ecuador, and it's located at almost 3,000 meters high from the mountains and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, the question was simple. Where do you live? I live in Quito. That's it. They don't need to say anything else. Memorizing answers do not work. They can practice and probably memorize certain discourse markers. For example, I think, I believe, I'm not sure. Well, okay, those words correctly, right? But not answers, not complete answers, because it's very it's extremely conspicuous. It's noticeable when we find a candidate that has memorized answers, right? And that is not going to help them at all. So for the A2 key, the speaking exam is divided into parts, right? The first part is general factual questions. Here you have examples, you know, where do you live? And then they have to answer questions about sports, maybe food, maybe school, maybe their friends, typical topics, okay? The most important part of this the most important response that they have to focus on this part of the test is the extended response. Why? Because in here, remember, look at this. How do you see your friend? How often do you see your friends? I usually see my friends, or every weekend. Perfect. That's a correct answer, right? Now, what is better? How often do you see your friends? And they say every weekend. But there's another student that tells me I see my friends every weekend. Obviously, the one that has given me an extended response, a complete sentence, will probably score more because it's not using just one word, right? So tell them, not just to use one word, you know, statements, complete sentence. They know how to make compound and complex sentences at this point. They can create that. So remind your students that in part one, they have this part that is called the extended response. Now, why is this important? Because sometimes the students come to the test and they don't know. They just answer one thing. And here it says clearly, tell me something, right? And of course, they say, oh, tell me something. I say something, and that's everything that I need to do. However, for this part, what they are expected to do is to give you at least 3 sentences. For example, tell me something about one of your friends, Marjorie. Well, my best friend's name is Michelle. She is tall and she has long, straight blonde hair. She enjoys cycling on the weekends, and I love her because she really gets me. I gave 4 sentences, right? So a student who is prepared will know that at this point, it's at least 3 sentences. Why? Because if I say, tell me something, and the person just tells me, well, my best friend is Michelle, then I have to use the prompts. And what happens with the prompts? That will interfere in the score for interactive communication. Why? Because I need to prompt the student in order to get an answer, instead of having an independent student giving me the answer. Clear? So when you explain this part of the test, remind them about the extended response. How many sentences do they need at this point? At least 3 sentences, okay? This is why I have put here with my post-it, practice, tell me something. All right, so now we have, okay, here are some ideas, right? Do not memorize answers. Remind them not to give one-word answer, to give sentences and to stay relaxed. And the second part of the test is the collaborative task, in which they are going to have 5 pictures. Now, For this is important that your students have alternatives to the verbs like and dislike. Teach them I like, I love for the favorite, I enjoy. Maybe if you want already to be preparing your students for the B1 exam, teach them expressions such as I am fond of, I am really into, I am keen on this. Even though these are words that they might know at B1 or B2 level of English, you can already introduce them to this, because what they need to do is to say whether they like it or not. And what happens is that at this point, students just say, oh, I like going to picnics and I like eating at the cafeteria of my school and I like, and I like, and I like. And then there's not really enough input for the examiner, to grade the student accordingly. So practice this in class and also tell them to look at their partner, because in this part of the test, they are not working with the teacher or with the examiner in this case. They are working with the other candidate, and they are graded always for vocabulary and grammar, pronunciation, and interactive communication. And that, just the fact that that person looks at the other, will also, affect the score. And what do you think? And do you like this? No, not really, because of this, all right? Giving reasons why. Otherwise, the teacher, the examiner in this case, will have to use the prompts. And remember what happens. When an examiner uses the prompts, that generally affects the interactive communication part of the exam, okay? And finally, we have the last topic, that is the discussion. For here, your students have to give a complex or compound sentence. Does anybody remember the difference between complex and compound sentence? A complex sentence is the kind of sentence that is connected, or that connects one independent clause with a dependent clause. In this case, we use subordinate conjunctions: because, if, when, before, after, etc. Whereas a compound sentence, it's the one that uses coordinating conjunctions, right? So, and, but, so. They need to know this kind of sentence, introduce them in class. Does anybody have any questions? Look here, I have shared with you this link. So this is the link that I use. I don't know if you remember that I talked to you about shadowing at the beginning. I say to you that shadowing is the technique in which you tell your students to emulate, imitate, repeat exactly what they heard, okay? So here, this is something that you find, and they have a bunch of material in Learn English Teens from the British Council. And I love this kind of activities because not only are you going to have a video to shadow, to use during the conversation or the interaction or the role play, but also you have a couple of exercises, like drilling exercises that you can use in class. So take a look at this activity. It's really good for your practice. And with that, we have finally finished all the components of the A2Key exam. As I said before, for this exam, students are expected to get between 120 and 140 according to the Cambridge scale score. But if a student gets from 120 to 132, that student is considered to pass. The same happens if they get 133 to 139, they pass with merit. But if the student gets more, then the student won't get a certificate from A2Key. Instead, they will get a certificate for B1 preliminary. And at the same time, if the student cannot score 120 or more, unfortunately, that student won't get the A2Key certificate, all right? Please, if you want, you can take a screenshot of this part. Here I have put some vocabulary and grammar topics, but you don't really need it, because if you take a look at the handbook, here you're going to have everything more detailed, right? Let me just erase here. You can take a picture, a screenshot of this. the handbook for teachers. At the end, you will find a bunch of resources that you can use and topics, so you can structure your classes according to those topics. You will have your vocabulary list, but in case that you don't want to go to the handbook, here I am giving you the other website. This is excellent. Cambridge English exams and tests. You have a bunch of material resources. I use this one for free mock tests that I can download and use in my classes. And this is another, I'm pretty sure that you guys are familiar with Flo Joe. He has not just for the A2 key, but also for the other exams and qualifications, a bunch of exercises, okay? Does anybody have any questions so far? Here you have my information. Remember that I am representing Books and Beats. I'm sorry if I was like very fast, but to be honest, 2 hours are not enough. But I really hope that I kept giving you enough insight and enough information and ideas, especially strategies for you to use with your students in class, okay?